If you look at Etihad Airways today, you'll see a profitable, efficient airline serving Abu Dhabi. But that's not the airline that existed a decade ago. In the 2010s, Etihad was taking delivery of Airbus A380s, buying stakes in airlines across 4 continents, backed by billions in government support as part of a strategy designed to transform Abu Dhabi into the aviation capital of the world. By 2020, 3 of the airlines Etihad invested in collapsed. Air Berlin, Jet Airways, Alitalia was on the brink of collapse, which happened in 2021. And those 10 Airbus A380s? Grounded, parked in the desert, written off as economically unviable. This is the anti-Emirates story. Same region, same government backing, catastrophically different outcome. Etihad's expansion strategy didn't just fail, it destroyed billions in sovereign wealth, triggered the collapse of multiple international carriers, and forced the airline into a complete identity crisis. By the end of this video, you'll understand why buying minority stakes in struggling airlines was doomed from the start, why 10 A380s couldn't fill themselves without a network to feed them, and why Abu Dhabi's attempt to catch up with Dubai nearly bankrupted its flagship carrier. Let's start with the fundamental problem Etihad was trying to solve. Emirates had an 18-year head start. By the time Etihad launched in 2003, Dubai had already built plenty of infrastructure for its flagship airline, Emirates. Emirates operated over 50 aircraft. Dubai International processed tens of millions of passengers annually. The hub-and-spoke model was locked in and growing. Etihad faced a geometric problem. Abu Dhabi is 139 kilometers from Dubai. That's 86 miles. Close enough that the 2 cities share the same traffic feed. Far enough that building a separate hub from scratch would require decades of organic growth. Etihad didn't have decades. It had a mandate from the Abu Dhabi government: make us competitive with Dubai. The solution? Skip the organic growth entirely. Etihad would buy its way into global aviation, purchase stakes in airlines worldwide, use those airlines as feeder networks to funnel passengers through Abu Dhabi, fill the massive aircraft it was ordering with transfer traffic it didn't have to build from scratch. On paper, it was brilliant. In practice, it was catastrophic. Here's how minority airline investments are supposed to work. You buy a 20 to 49% share in a foreign carrier. In some jurisdictions, ownership laws prevent you from taking majority control, but you gain influence. You make corporate decisions. You begin sharing frequent flyer programs, feeding passengers to each other's hubs. Etihad took this concept and pushed it to extremes. Between 2011 and 2015, Etihad acquired stakes in 7 airlines. Air Berlin at 29.2%, Alitalia 49%, Jet Airways at 24%, Virgin Australia at around 25%, Air Seychelles 40%, Air Serbia 49%, and Darwin Airline at 33.3%. The total investment ran into billions of dollars. But here's what's interesting. Etihad wasn't buying healthy airlines. It was buying distressed carriers, airlines that were already bleeding cash, companies that needed life support, not a passive investor. Air Berlin had been losing money for years before Etihad arrived. Alitalia was effectively a ward of the Italian state, surviving on repeated government bailouts. Jet Airways was drowning in debt, locked in a price war with low-cost carriers it couldn't win. Etihad believed it could restructure these airlines while simultaneously extracting feeder traffic. It couldn't do either. Here's the uncomfortable truth about minority stakes. You own part of the company, but you don't control it. Etihad demanded changes, new routes to Abu Dhabi, schedule coordination, cost-cutting measures, labor reforms. It was met with resistance at every turn. Alitalia's unions refused to accept restructuring. The Italian government blocked layoffs for political reasons. Route changes that made sense for Abu Dhabi made no sense for Rome. Air Berlin faced similar problems. German labor laws protected workers. Management resisted Etihad's interference. The airline continued burning cash while Etihad watched helplessly. Jet Airways founder Naresh Goyal refused to cede control. He'd built the airline over decades. He wasn't about to let Abu Dhabi dictate strategy. Etihad found itself in an impossible position. It was responsible for losses it couldn't prevent, accountable for decisions it couldn't make, funding operations it couldn't control. The math was brutal. Every dollar Etihad pumped into these airlines disappeared into the same operational black holes that had caused their problems in the first place. The collapses came faster than anyone expected. Air Berlin filed for insolvency in August 2017. Etihad had injected hundreds of millions into the carrier, including purchasing its frequent flyer program. The German bankruptcy administrator later pursued Etihad for substantial damages, claiming the airline had withdrawn support too abruptly. Alitalia entered administration 3 months earlier. In May 2017, Etihad's approximately €1.75 billion total commitment to the airline evaporated. The airline would stagger through multiple restructurings before finally being replaced by Etihad Airways in 2021. Jet Airways lasted longer, but not by much. The airline ended operations in April 2019 after running out of cash. Pilots went unpaid. Aircraft were grounded for non-payment of leases. Etihad's stake was worthless. Virgin Australia entered voluntary administration in April 2020. Air Seychelles was sold back to its government in 2021. Darwin Airline, rebranded as Etihad Regional, went bankrupt in 2017. By 2020, essentially every major equity alliance partner had collapsed or required Etihad to exit at massive losses. Between 2016 and 2020 alone, Etihad lost $5.62 billion. Industry analysts estimated Abu Dhabi had injected at least $22 billion into Etihad between 2003 and 2019 to keep the entire operation afloat. Now, here's where the A380 enters the story. Etihad took delivery of 10 Airbus A380s between 2014 and 2017, aircraft it had originally ordered back in 2004. At list prices, that's approximately $4.4 billion in aircraft alone. Actual transaction prices were likely lower due to discounts, but still represented a massive capital commitment. The A380 was supposed to be the crown jewel of Etihad's transformation. The airline installed the Residence, a 3-room private suite with a living room, bedroom, and ensuite shower. It offered first-class and business-class suites. Premium economy. The onboard product was genuinely world-class. But here's the thing about the A380, it only makes money when you can fill it. The aircraft carries 486 passengers in Etihad's configuration. That's 486 seats that need bodies. Every flight, every day. Emirates fills its A380s because Dubai has organic feeder traffic, decades of network building, established connections from Europe, Africa, Asia, and beyond. Etihad was supposed to fill its A380s with traffic from the equity alliance partners, traffic that was now evaporating. Let's walk through the economics. An A380 operating from Abu Dhabi to London needs premium cabin revenue to subsidize the massive economy section. Business class passengers pay enough to cover the first class product. Economy passengers fill the downstairs deck and generate volume. But where do those economy passengers come from? In Emirates' model, they came from connections. A passenger flying Mumbai to Manchester connects through Dubai. Bangkok to Birmingham connects through Dubai. Hundreds of origin-destination pairs funneling through a single hub. In Etihad's model, those connections were supposed to come from Air Berlin, feeding European traffic, from Alitalia, feeding Italian traffic, from Jet Airways, feeding Indian traffic. With those airlines collapsing, the feed disappeared. Etihad found itself operating A380s on routes where it couldn't fill the aircraft. The load factors dropped, the per-seat costs soared, the premium product couldn't compensate for empty economy sections. The planes worked perfectly, the business model didn't. In March 2020, Etihad grounded all 10 A380s. CEO Tony Douglas was blunt. The aircraft was no longer commercially sustainable. The fleet was parked, first at Abu Dhabi, then gradually moved to long-term storage facilities. the first A380, registration A6APA, was sent to Tarbes Airport in France for storage and eventually part out. By mid-2030, Etihad's entire super jumbo fleet sat idle. The contrast with Emirates was devastating. Emirates operates 94 A380s currently, with plans to expand to 110 active aircraft by late 2026. It's investing $5 billion in cabin retrofits, installing high-speed Wi-Fi, upgrading entertainment systems, preparing to fly the type into the 2040s. Same aircraft, same region, opposite trajectories. The difference wasn't the airplane, the difference was the network. Emirates built organically over 40 years. Etihad tried to buy a network in 5 years. One worked, one didn't. The collapse of the Equity Alliance strategy triggered a complete transformation of Etihad. The global megacarrier ambitions were abandoned. Etihad cancelled orders for dozens of wide-body aircraft. The planned fleet of over 200 aircraft was slashed. Routes were cut. The airline downsized according to demand. No more trying to compete with Emirates for transfer traffic. No more requiring struggling airlines. No more super jumbo dreams. Tony Douglas, who replaced James Hogan in 2018, focused on one thing: making the existing operation profitable. Fleet simplification became the priority. The A330s were phased out. The A340s disappeared. The 777-300ER fleet was reduced. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner became the core of the long-haul network, supplemented by the Airbus A350-1000. Smaller, more efficient, right-sized for actual demand. In October 2022, ownership of Etihad was transferred from direct government control to ADQ, one of Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth funds. This wasn't just an administrative shuffle, it signaled a fundamental shift in how Abu Dhabi viewed its airline. Under direct government ownership, Etihad could pursue strategic goals that didn't require profitability: nation building, prestige, competition with Dubai. Under ADQ, Etihad became one asset among many in a diversified portfolio. Financial discipline became paramount. Returns mattered. The era of blank check funding was over. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Despite everything, the billions lost, the grounded fleet, the never again pronouncements, Etihad brought the A380 back. In July 2023, the airline reactivated A380 service to London Heathrow. Why? Post-pandemic demand surged faster than anyone expected. Airport slot constraints intensified at major hubs like Heathrow. The global aircraft backlog made new deliveries difficult to secure. Suddenly, the A380's economics looked different. At slot-constrained airports, the Super Jumbo's capacity advantage matters. One A380 slot moves 486 passengers. A Boeing 787 slot moves around 300. If you can't add flights, you add seats. By mid-2025, 7 A380s were back in operation. Routes now include Singapore, London, Paris, and Toronto. The airline plans to operate 8 A380s by June 2026 and 9 by January 2027. Only one aircraft, A6APA, was scrapped. But here's what's critical: Etihad isn't repeating its old strategy. The A380s are deployed selectively, only on routes where they're profitable, only where slot constraints make their capacity advantage decisive, only where premium demand can fill the upper deck. This is the opposite of the 2015 strategy, which assumed the Equity Alliance would generate traffic to fill aircraft regardless of route economics. Antonio Neves, Etihad's current CEO, has been explicit: the A380 will fly, as long as the numbers work. The aircraft is treated as a tactical tool, not a strategic cornerstone. If demands shift, the planes go back to storage. No sentimentality, no prestige considerations, pure economics. The transformation has produced results. In 2024, Etihad reported a recorded profit of $476 million on total revenue of $6.9 billion. Passenger numbers hit 18.5 million, up from 14 million the previous year. Cargo revenue increased 24%. The recovery didn't happen by flying bigger aircraft or expanding faster. It happened by shrinking, by focusing on routes where Etihad had natural advantages, by abandoning the fantasy of competing with Emirates for global hub dominance. Reports have suggested the airline may eventually pursue an IPO, potentially raising $1 billion, which would make it the first major Gulf carrier to go public. What does the Etihad story teach us about airline strategy? First, minority stakes don't fix broken airlines. You can't restructure a company you don't control. Etihad learned this repeatedly with Alitalia, Air Berlin, Jet Airways, and others. The equity alliance model was fundamentally flawed because it assumed influence could substitute for control. Second, aircraft need networks, not the reverse. Etihad bought A380s expecting to fill them with traffic from partner airlines. When those airlines collapsed, the A380 had nowhere to go. Emirates succeeds with the A380 because it spent decades building organic feed. There's no shortcut. Third, sovereign wealth has limits. Abu Dhabi is extraordinarily wealthy, but billions in government support still triggered a complete strategic reversal. Even petrostates eventually demand accountability. Fourth, right-sizing works. Etihad's recovery came from abandoning the mega-carrier ambitions and accepting reality. A profitable boutique airline serving Abu Dhabi's natural demand is worth more than a money-losing Emirates competitor. Today, Etihad operates over 120 aircraft, serving more than 80 destinations. It's growing again, carefully, profitably, within its means. The A380s are flying again, but on Etihad's terms, selected routes, selected markets, economics first. The equity alliance strategy is dead. No more stakes in struggling carriers, no more dreams of a global network built through acquisition. Abu Dhabi learned the most expensive lesson in aviation history. You cannot buy your way to hub dominance, you have to build it. Emirates understood this from the beginning. Etihad understands it now. The superjumbo didn't fail Etihad, Etihad failed the superjumbo. By ordering aircraft it couldn't fill for a network it couldn't build, funded by investments that couldn't survive. The same aircraft, the same region, the same government backing. Catastrophically different outcomes. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?